Cool.
Well, why I say mainly? No, not mainly Dungeon23, but I think Dungeon23 as far as writing dungeons.
That was the triggering event, right?
Yeah,
Sort
I
of.
thought, you know what, you're talking about it. It's kind of a thing that's going on, and
Yeah.
it's I think a evergreen topic,
Mm-hmm.
and I think especially, well, I won't say anymore. So
Okay.
because I could just be talking on the podcast and recording.
Right. Okay.
So are you ready?
I think so. I hope so.
Okay, I'm gonna say 1, 2, 3.
All right.
I'll say hello, Jacob. 1, 2, 3. Hello, Jacob.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Well, thanks for having me back. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, well, you're one of the few people left on Twitter that
Soon. I don't know. I swear all I do every day is I just lose followers. And I'm like, am I saying bad things, or is this just people going away, or bots being cleaned up? I don't even know what's happening anymore. So that's okay.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's kind of like, because there's fewer people, it's I don't know. It's not worse. It's not better. It's just I start seeing, I think, more of the same people. It's like I guess the crowds thinned out, so it's more noticeable people you see all the time, which is fine. I guess Elon Musk is kind of making a private place for just a few of us.
We'll see. I don't even know. I don't even know. I'm just kind of like, I think I've been through enough social media platforms at this point that I'm like, I don't really want to start all over again, but I'll just ride this one until it crashes and burns into the ground.
Yes,
but we'll see. So I don't know.
there's still hope.
Well, I don't know.
I still can't get over it, but anywho, enough airwaves about Elon before he bans us like he does.
Exactly.
I guess I'm not a journalist, so maybe I don't count. I don't know.
Just don't link your Mastodon account and you'll be fine.
Don't even talk about linking your Mastodon account.
That's right.
He just zapped somebody. I think it was a fellow investor, whatever. And he just mentioned that and got banned. So much for free speech with Elon Musk.
I mean, there is the part of it, though, that I do feel like I have seen a lot of people that have explicitly stated, like, I'm not going to have conversations on Twitter anymore. I'm just going to post links. And I feel like I've seen a number of people kind of in the RPG circles that are like, I'm not going to be here anymore, but I'm going to continue to come here and sort of like make my blog posts and post about my book that I've written. And I guess I'm going to be like a horrible like stand for Elon or whatever right now, but I do kind of get potentially saying like, listen, if you're going to leave, then leave, for what that's worth. Because I mean, that is one of the things where it's like, yeah, I understand like trying to juggle like 6 social media platforms is really difficult to share all of your content, but it just sucks because it's destroying the conversation, across the board.
And I think if up to this point that everything that Elon did was rational, I would agree. But the problem is you have a handful of people left.
That's right.
And those people might come back, but now you just alienated the people that were kind of on the margins.
It's chaos.
It is chaos.
It's chaos. Beautiful chaos.
Well, at least we're still on there.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where else I would really want to go at this point, but I'll figure it out. Back to the blog. Back to the blog.
I'm sure in the future there's something, the AI universe will take us somewhere beautiful.
Yes.
I'm sure.
Yes.
But until then, I guess with all the craziness of the Elons and the AIs and everything else, somebody brought up this idea of Dungeon23.
Yeah, Sean McCoy brought that up. I mean, honestly, it's kind of nice that if this is the twilight of Twitter, right? It does seem to have had a really big, that went viral, which is really cool. So yeah, at least good things still have happened in the encroaching darkness, I guess.
Well, and I'd say that, and that's where I kind of have some questions, because I understand the basic premise, but I kind of look at it with, tears slightly brimming on my eyes, that I just realized, like, what I really like to do is I would like to do a mega dungeon, but not in like the horizontal sense. What I would like to do is, and I mentioned on the podcast before, is do the you familiar with Expedition to Barrier Peaks,
Okay.
but do layer levels and each one being
Hmm.
its own dungeon,
Okay.
and then you can mix and match them in however way you wanted.
Hmm. Hmm. Just sort
But
of plug them into the slot kind of thing, like, and we'll put this dungeon level here and that dungeon level there, or
yeah, so the
yeah, yeah.
one might be the level 4 residential area, the other
Hmm.
one might be the engine room, but and
Okay.
it would be all be themed.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but anyhow, that's not happening this year. My other ambitions have ruled over the my chance of doing anything fun like that. So but anyway, so what exactly is Dungeon 23 and why are you doing it?
Well, I'm doing it because it sounded fun. I mean, and then that's of course the thing too, where it's like the it's always exciting at the beginning, but we'll see how everybody does. Like we'll check back in March and see how many people are sticking with it, right?
Yeah,
And how many will anyone make it to, will anyone do 365 days of dungeons? Um, but it was a very simple premise. That Sean McCoy was basically like, okay, Dungeon 23, 365 rooms for a mega dungeon. There's 12 months in the year. Each month is a level of the dungeon. Put it all in a notebook so it's all in one place and go. And one of his, I think it was in one of the follow-ups. I don't think it was in the original thing. He was saying, it's better to just say there's 3 orcs in a room, with a chest, than to leave a day blank. Like the objective is to just do a tiny little fragment every
right.
single day. And even if it's an empty room, just write it's an empty room, and that's okay. Because again, it's a mega dungeon, so 365 rooms. That's definitely totally fine for a number of them to be empty. Even a pretty good percentage of them.
Well, I think the
Um,
thing is the idea isn't that I'm assuming that at the end of the 365th day, the dungeon's ready for publication.
oh no, I don't think it's supposed to be ready for publication, but I think
Yeah.
it should. I think ideally you should be able to maybe run it, hopefully, at least for your friends, right? Because
Yeah.
you can write down, or I can write down like random like ravings on the back of a napkin, and I think I can run off of that sometimes. Um, but if I was to ever show it to anybody else, they would be like, I don't like, what even is this? Is this
Right.
English? What
Well, I
what
think the
does
thing
this
is
mean?
you need to keep the momentum. I think what he's
Yeah,
saying is if you just say, "Oh, I don't have anything today," and you
yeah,
do nothing, you've killed any potential momentum for the next day.
yep.
And I think the other thing too is like it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to probably be, the best writing, but at least think something through and put something down, knowing that, you can always go back later on and edit it.
Oh, definitely. Well, and I think for me too, like it actually worked out really nice for me. I guess maybe one of the reasons that I was like, oh, this sounds exciting, is because a couple months, or about a month ago or so, I just said, I have like a list of like, here are some daily things I want to do every day. And one of them that I wrote down was like, I want to write 100 words a day. Like, cause that sounds like a good thing. And then I started actually writing like 100 words a day. And I was like, that's a paragraph. I'm doing nothing, but but it's been because I'm more of a, like lock myself in a room for 6 hours and write, and
You
then
must suffer for your writing.
yes, I'm a binger and a purger, I guess. And so I'll have like 3 days of like, I'm doing nothing but this, and then I just break for maybe 5 days. And so I was like, no, I want to get a little more stable, and let's just do 100 words a day. That seems like a good goal. It's a good number. 100's nice and round. So let's try it. But then I started writing 100 words in a day, and I was like, I feel like I'm not doing anything. And so then I ended up writing more, but then I didn't want to, burn myself out. So that it's been an interesting thing. So I kind of like this, because one of the most important pieces of the Dungeon 23 thing for the idea is to put it all in a journal, put it all in a notebook. So it's all in that one space. And so I think maybe having not necessarily a word count limitation for myself every day, but just having um, like a page, like there's page constraints. Only so much can fit on one page. Um, and then I got a new, it was a nice excuse to buy a new journal, right? To
There you
buy
go.
a new notebook. I like my notebooks. Um, obviously. And then, here I go out and I make this book called The World Builder's Notebook, which I really like, and it's good and it would be perfect for this. And then I go and buy a different notebook. So to excuse myself, right? Like the whole thing is that it's this. Oh, I have it someplace else. Um, I can't remember the exact name of the notebook, but it's the one that Sean is using, and it uses this fancy Japanese tomoi. I think it is river paper. That's supposed to be. It's very thin. It's very nice. It's very beautiful. When I was actually doing the Kickstarter for the World Builder notebook, I'm pretty sure Sean hit me up and was like, "Hey, so are you going to have this like river paper in your World Builders notebook?" And I was like, "They don't offer it. I don't think so." He's like, "It's amazing. You need to have it. Like, it's going to change your life." So Dungeon23 rolls around. He recommends this notebook that has this life-changing paper in it. So I'm like, well, I'm going to try getting this life-changing paper and see. It's really nice. I will tell you that. Like, it's been a delight to write on a little bit so far. So we'll see. We'll see.
Well, I think the thing too is, I mean, when you're doing a journal, you're both kind of sketching out and writing. So
Hmm.
if you want to put more energy into drawing little details in the map, you can do that. Or if you want to spend one day you're feeling more a little wordy, you can be
Yeah.
a little more wordy.
Yeah. And there's extra pages in the back. So you can, if you're like, no, I have a great idea for a random table of something, you've got room for it. So that's really, really nice.
Yeah, that's and I think um I think it really kind of breaks down the like an old saying, something's hard by the yard, but it's a
Hmm.
cinch by the inch. And
Yep.
the idea is that if you do things like you said with your 100 words a day, it's just like once you break it down to small pieces and just maintain discipline, you can get
Yeah.
a lot done.
Yeah, I think George R. R. Martin has something along those lines about like you can't build the cathedral all at one time, and I mean, yeah, it's very true. And if you're thinking like, oh my god, I have to build this huge cathedral, it's definitely much harder. But if it's like, no, I'm going to do one room every single day, and it's going to be a short thing, and it doesn't have to be like this extravagant whatever. Um, yeah, assuming you can stick to it and be disciplined, by the end of it, by even halfway through, you can turn around and be like, dude, like I have something really cool and probably playable and testable at least. So that's the hope. It should be fun.
So are you starting, like, when are you actually starting this project?
I'm okay. I've pre-gamed a little bit, but I'm not going to write any rooms until January the 1st. And so I've kind of been, I'm hoping, because it's one of those things like when you start the project, you're in love with the project, it's very exciting, and then maybe some of the luster wears off as you start actually like doing the work. So I'm hoping that if I just like abstain for a little while and like keep it conceptual and thinking about it, that then maybe that'll give me a little more oomph for a longer time as I write, but we'll see. I mean, maybe I could have started now and it would be just fine, but yeah, I was like, no, I'm going to wait until January 1st. We're going to keep it 365 days. And see how it goes. But
Yeah, it's not Dungeon 22, it's Dungeon
right,
23.
exactly. Now, like I said though, I did do some pre-games because I think one of the things that's important for me is I at least want to have a general idea of who's in the dungeon. Um, so I picked sort of like the big bad guy for the end, if you will, or like who's at the bottom of the dungeon that's causing a lot of the problems, and then what are the general like layers going to be of it. Um, and so I've already kind of broken away from the prompt, which is supposed to be like 12 months of mega dungeon, and of course I'm like, no, I want a town and I want an overland area, so I'm going to do 10 months of mega dungeon, 1 month of town, 1 month of overland, or at least that's my goal. We'll see how that goes.
Or you could do the town, the overland now, and then
I,
do the
I could, but I'm like, no, I'm going to make that part of it. So, yeah, exactly.
yeah, I think somebody was, I think, mentioning how even some people are what they call anti that's what I'm looking for, authority, whatever. But there's people who
Mhm.
have like rebelled against it and created their own little different versions of it. But
Oh, yeah, no, there's quite a few. There's one guy who's doing he's straight up, well, because it's funny because of course like Sean is doing mothership and sci-fi, and so then he's like Dungeon23, which is it sounded like he was going to be taking like a high fantasy kind of approach. And then there's another guy out there, what's his name, on Twitter, it's Lost Archivist. He's done some really pretty like mothership modules. but he came out and he was like, he was going to do, he called it Facility 23 because he was going to go more like sci-fi
Yeah.
and stuff. So I mean, it's just, it lends itself very, very easily to kind of whatever you want to do. Because again, the point is write a little thing every day that can all go into one big cohesive whole. So at the end of the year, you can turn around and be like, whoa, look at all this cool stuff I did.
Yeah, and it seems like a little bit more measured approach than say was it the Wan I can't say it when no Ramo or write a novel a month, where that is,
Oh yeah, yeah.
where it's like that's kind of an intense month, which I think in itself is useful.
Mhm.
But yeah, not that I've done it,
Right. No,
but
I haven't either.
conceptually, it seems like a great idea.
Right, right.
That you just put a lot of focus, you just take a month and like you said, to lock yourself in a room kind of thing. You
Hmm.
can do that for 30 days, but I think this is kind of a similar approach, but a little more stretched out. And I think, very practical,
What?
especially I think if you're just doing strictly, mega dungeon, it doesn't have to make sense. So it's not like you're
No.
having to create some sort of cohesion.
Right. And then you can have a different theme every week. So I mean you can really go funhouse with it. It's like this week I'm gonna just write about mushrooms, and next week I'm gonna write about, I don't know, crystals or whatever. Um and then the next week I'm gonna do the sewer level. And so you can sort of bounce around, which is nice. Um Potentially, conceptually. We'll see how
Well,
again.
and I think too, it's like, probably for you and for a lot of people, I would assume for me if I was doing it, but I'm not. But it can also just be like I think anytime you're exercising your imagination, it's a good thing, and it could
Mhm.
generate ideas for things later on.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You can definitely, or I think you should steal from yourself and steal your own ideas to use in other things that are maybe more, the more polished final version. It's like, oh, I've was going to make a little zine of this thing, and then I actually just like we got so far, and then well, I've just chopped it up and pulled all of its organs out and put them into this other, monstrosity that I'm working on because it makes more sense over there. So yeah, I think something like this is a good thing for you're generating resources for yourself or creative resources for yourself potentially. Um, is my thought. Yeah.
And I guess the thing is, if you're doing themes, you could probably, and I think because I think when we're working on projects for selling, you look at your time. I mean, we have limited time,
Hmm.
and you're like, is this what I'm pursuing valuable as far as producing something that's useful for me in that realm, where I think when you're doing what you're doing with the Dungeon 23, or people are doing what you're doing, you can just say I'm going to be creative for the sake of being creative.
Hmm.
And that's a good place to be, not just be stuck in whatever it is project that you're in, trying to get done by the end of the month so that you can go to Kickstarter in 2 months kind of
Right.
thing.
Right. Well, and also, I mean, it's good to have something like that that's just, it's almost like a little exercise to do where it's like, okay, so I'm stuck. I need to write. I know I need to write this thing, but like I'm not feeling it. I need to get started with something. Um and so like that was one of the things for me that I found, like I never thought that I would be a uh like a public writer, that I would enjoy going and like sitting in a coffee shop and writing. Like I never thought that I would like that. And then I tried it one time and I was like, I really like this, because what I found is that if I started getting stuck, I would just start writing down what was happening around me. And as I would just like describe what was going on around me, it kind of like shook the rust off or whatever. And then I would be able to get more rapidly back to what it is I was doing. Um, as opposed to other places where it's like, oh, let me go research on a Wikipedia article real quick, and then 4 hours later I'm somewhere on YouTube watching I don't know what, but there was a path that got there, right? Right. So
the
yeah, but
and I think too, when you go away, it's out of your normal space.
hmm,
So those normal distractions are, when I say normal, I mean not just people, but just
right,
you're
yeah.
there to write. You're there to do something, not just scroll around on Facebook or go get yourself
Hmm.
something out of the refrigerator or whatever it may be.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so, and then having like a little prompt, like a Dungeon 23 is like a good way to just like, okay, I'm going to start with this and I'm going to do this little thing that I don't have to care about. It's like, it doesn't matter if it doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be amazing. It doesn't have to be really tied into anything. It can just be what I'm thinking about today. And I can incorporate what I'm thinking about today. So then that's also what makes it really cool by having it all in a journal, because even though, yes, for the third week of March, I was writing about mushrooms, or, little mushroom people that lived in their mushroom houses, that, you can look back on that potentially at the end of the year and be like, oh yeah, and there were these things that were going on that were making me think about that at that time. So it is a nice little reference. So, you get a creative thing at the end, and you kind of get a little glimpse into how your mind was firing, I guess.
That is, I've never ever thought of that as using if you do something every day and it's creative, the potential for the real life to bleed into your creative work.
Oh yeah.
And then you go back and look at it and you're like, why was this so dark? And you're like, oh yeah, this is exactly why this was so
Right.
dark at this time.
My car broke down and I had packages missing or whatever. It's like, yeah. That's, yes, exactly. So I don't know. Or it's like, I was playing a lot of Elden Ring at the time, so, oh, look at that, I guess I can see it here now, or whatever.
Right. I used to find myself, even though I was never that good, that a lot of times I found myself, I was reading a lot of a particular author, I would
Mhm.
all of a sudden start kind of finding myself somewhat mimicking them in
Sure,
writing.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah. Well, that voice has been going
yeah,
on in your head for
yeah.
3 weeks or whatever. Yeah, you're gonna mimic a little bit. I think that's just very natural, so, yeah.
Well, the thing is like I've wondered, it's like for instance, like doing a term paper.
Mhm.
We'll pick at something simple rather than something more complicated, or even writing a story or a zine. Is 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 when you is if it would, no matter what sort of different reality,
Mhm.
will they all arrive at the same point, or how much will a paper change just based on the day, the time?
Absolutely.
I don't know. What's your feeling?
Well, I mean, that goes back, it's like the Twitter chaos. How much chaos is really causing you to go where you're going? I don't know. I have no idea. I have no idea.
Nature nurture kind of thing, I
Right.
guess. Are you destined?
Right.
Are you just living out the universe's dictates, that
Exactly.
of action and reaction,
Hmm.
and I guess everything being a reaction, only one initial action, but
That's right.
or are we autonomous?
Dungeons and Dragons addressing all the big philosophical questions
It,
for,
it does. So when you start this,
Mhm.
I'm assuming you kind of, I probably even thought this, like, so do you start with, like, maybe not just you as in everybody, but just you as in you, Jacob, but
Mhm.
do you start out like this is the entrance, or do you just pick and choose where you're going to go start out with, or?
I am starting at the bottom. I'm starting in the abyss, because the lowest dungeon, or the lowest level of the dungeon that I am planning, is going to be in the abyss. I'm planning on using the demon lord, what's his name, Gratz, or Grazzt. I don't even know how to say his name. It's one of those things that I read, I never say it out loud. So Grazit, something like that. Whatever. He's like the dude that shows up in mirrors and tries to seduce people, and, to be evil. And he's got Merilith henchmans, and he has like hanging perfumed gardens and ivory towers in hell. And I was like, that seems like a good bad guy for me to use. I can work with that. So I'm gonna start there. And like the first room that I'm planning to write is like, here is his throne room, if you will, in this portion of his ivory tower in hell. And then I'm gonna do that level first. And what I'm hoping, and I mean, I don't know, this could all fall apart on me, but I'm hoping that the stuff that I come up with down there will then be able to feed the other levels of the dungeon, right? Because if we start there and we know that this is the bad guy, then in February, when I'm working on the town, it's a lot easier to talk about the cult that worships the demon in town. And then you can sort of see echoes, maybe,
Oh,
so
I
then
think I
people can be like,
misunderstood.
oh,
So
sorry,
you're starting with the ending and you're
I'm
working your way
starting
to the
with the
beginning.
ending. And, well, I'm going to start with the ending, and then I'm going to go to the beginning, and then
Okay.
come down.
Does it say,
Sorry.
okay, can I say, like, wow, you're starting out the dungeon
Yeah, yeah.
with in the abyss, but really
Mhm.
the characters aren't. You
No,
are.
right. Characters are not starting there. I'm starting there because I'm hoping that then I can say
Oh.
like, all right, so I don't know, there's a library in hell and one of the books is missing. And then like, oh, but of course that book is up in town and that gets things started. And so then, they're the people down below are looking for that the maybe the players have already found or something. I don't know, things like that. I'm hoping that connections will naturally emerge, which will then make it easier to maintain, you know, forward momentum so that because I don't want to get to a point where it's like, I have no idea what to write about today. I don't know. Like I'm hoping because I think it was Hemingway that said something about how you always want to have your next paragraph planned out, like stop writing when you know what your next sentence is going to be so that then when you start writing the next day you can just start writing kind of like immediately. I don't know, I'm butchering this quote and I may be even misattributing it, but I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure it was him. So yeah, that's the hope, is that I'll be able to do things like that. We'll see if that actually works, of course, but that's the big picture idea.
Yeah, it kind of made me think what'd be interesting is if you could play but you're because at first I was thinking first level characters, in the 20th level of a dungeon kind of thing, which I thought that's kind of interesting. But I thought, well, you could start out high level. I wonder if there would be a reason for start out high level, but the mechanics are working such a way that your characters decrease in level as you go forward, and that you really are wanting to turn to a normal person by the end. Otherwise, something happens.
Nice. That's pretty cool. Like a Wonderland, serve your cake before you eat it kind of thing. Like I love it. Or serve your cake before you cut it. But yeah, no, that could be fun. Like actually like shirking your getting rid of your heroic powers and going back to being just, regular Joe.
Yeah, at the end, you're like Cincinnaticus. You want to go plow your field and be a
Hmm.
farmer.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I like it.
I don't know if there would be a good way of doing that, or if anybody would enjoy having their characters diminish. But
Right.
it's kind of interesting because we do keep the power levels. I mean,
Hmm.
the game system really kind of does try and keep the power levels relatively equal, right?
Hmm.
So challenge wise, it's still the same. It's just that your characters are diminishing as well as the monsters themselves rather than increasing.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. It's I had to think about that. So and I think that's wise because I mean it's kind of like with probably any adventure. Well, I'd say with any, but
Hmm.
it's, yeah, short of like sandbox adventures, the idea is to come up with the ending so then you can move towards it so that there's some sort of logical progression rather than just kind of figuring it out as you go.
Well, I do still want it to be sandboxy and I do still want it to be like I don't necessarily want to have I guess like I never want to come up with any answers. I guess I just always want to be more focused on like what are the problems. So if you do have the demon lord who's bored and living in the abyss, like, well, what is the stuff that he wants? Because if I can come up with the things that he wants that are probably reflected in the rooms and stuff he has around him, then that's going to have consequences for the upper levels, right? Like there are things that have been stolen, or there are things that are um that he wants to bring down to where he is, which is then going to sort of have a hopefully have a it's like your conflict generators, right? Like I
Mm.
want the conflict generator here and conflict generator there and conflict generator there, and then the players come up with the answers, and maybe their answers are terrible, but I don't care. Like I'm not coming up with the answers. I'm coming up with just problems. Thank you. Here's a list of problems that you get to deal with. Have fun.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And they can all have their own reasons for
Mhm.
wanting to make it to the last level.
And maybe they never make it to the last level, and that's fine, and maybe nobody ever goes to the abyss, and that's cool, but there should hopefully be enough stuff upstairs to be worth it. I mean, because like that's one of the beautiful things too about mega dungeons. So just like literally yesterday, um I ran an in-person game, uh because so I play with a group every Tuesday, and we've been playing fifth edition for several years now. And then of course I'm like, well, let's play some more old school games, guys. And so we did. we were just at this moment in the campaign that we've been playing in and everything where uh the current dungeon master was not ready to sort of like go to the next spot, and it was like, well, now would be a good time for a one shot. And so I was like, well, let me do a one shot of Castles in Tillin um by Gabber Lux. And we'll just do it as a one shot. It's a mega dungeon. You guys start out in town. Everybody start out with random characters. Um, and we went in and had a fantastic time. And so I was able to stress to them, or I stressed to them a lot before things started. Like, remember, this is not a fifth edition adventure. This is not like a linear dungeon. You can go in from wherever you are. Like, there are like multiple entrances. You don't have to go in the first place you see. And so I think it worked out beautifully. I mean, they picked a path and they went in and they went through, I want to say like 13, 14 rooms. We had some random encounters. Everybody, like, they seemed like they had a blast. They were saying that they would be interested in continuing to like run it. And it was really nice because like I feel like I did pre-gaming and pre-planning, um mostly of just like reading the module and understanding like where the connections were and stuff. But then when it started, I was just running from the book. Oh, you guys go in here. Okay, here's what's in here. Well, how do you want to interact with this? What do you want to do? And then we had a beautiful random encounter, and it carried the whole game. So again, like, it was just these simple little problems, or they were very easy to understand problems, and it blossomed through chaos into a great little adventure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm all about that.
Yeah, and I think that's just it. And it goes to show, really, I think there are a place for different styles of
Mhm.
adventures.
Oh yeah.
Playing a mega dungeon every time, that's not very fulfilling. But when you're playing all these others where the stakes are the universe and
Oh yeah.
it's like, then it's like, you know what? I just want to just see some crazy things, fight some
Yeah.
monsters, and just see what kind of trouble we can get into.
It can be enough to just have an orc in a room with a chest. I mean, it's something that I think people in the OSR like to poke. Oh, it's just an orc in a room with a chest. But I mean, like, there's a place for that. It works sometimes, and it works great. Um, or it can, as long as it's not that over and over and over again. Uh,
Well, I think
but
with the reaction roll table, that's where the real juice can come in,
oh
because
yeah.
that could turn into, hey, he wants to join us. It's like,
Right. Or if you're not assuming combat as the default, right?
right.
Like, I mean, because that was the thing. Like, okay, so the guys, they went into the castle, they walked around through a few places, they came to this hallway. The hallway was like full of spiders, not big spiders, but little spiders. It was full of cobwebs. So they're like, we're gonna turn around and we're gonna go back the other way. And I'd been rolling for random encounters and I hadn't gotten anything. And then they start walking down this hall. I roll. I get that I got a party of like skeletal ladies that were all, like dressed up but in tattered gowns and tattered, wigs and stuff. But it was a group, it was 2d12 of these skeletal ladies. And so I rolled my two. There were 11. There were 11 total. And I'm like, well, that grossly outnumbers, the party. So if they were to have a combat, like, it would have been like brutal and horrible, and they would not have won. But it even said in the little the random encounter, it was like, they may be swayed by courtly manners or whatnot. And so I'm quickly trying to spitball, like, well, like, why are there 11 skeletal ladies right here? And I look down at the map and I'm like, oh, they're like 3 rooms away from a chapel. So they're on their way to go to chapel right now. For whatever reason. And so then the guy who was playing the cleric in the group was like super hamming it up, or he always super hams it up. And so then he just, is like, oh, this is what I'm here for. Like, I'm here to try and schmooze these, like 11 skeletal ladies, and like, oh, let's all go to church together. And it worked out wonderfully, and everybody had a wonderful time, and it was fantastic. And it didn't have to be a combat, because it was like, yeah, you guys can talk to the monsters and you can do stuff. Like, there's this threat level, because it could very easily turn into a combat. But because combat was not the default assumption, I think everybody had so much fun with it. Like, they had a lot of fun with it, it seemed. um but part of that, I think one of the main like the main impetus. First, I'm super down for it to not be a combat, but part of it too is the guy playing the cleric, he rolled this random character, on a character generator, and he had 1 hit point. So since he had 1 hit point, he's like, I cannot get into combat at all. Like, I can't, if I get touched, I'm dead. So I'm going to have to play the game in a way that's very different than playing a 5th edition game. Because if it was a 5th edition game and 11 skeletons come into the room, yes, maybe they're dressed like ladies and they have their fans and their, ruined powdered wigs. But it's like, well, this is probably going to be a combat because we're supposed to fight the monsters. But then in more old school games, I think it's like, well, no, we have to try and figure out how we don't have combat because it's so lethal. So we want to avoid it because I only have 1 hit point and I can't, like, they could sneeze on me and I'm dead,
You could gain another level and still only have 2 hit points.
Right. No, exactly. So yeah, I think
your tuberculosis didn't get any better, Johnny.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things, I mean, to go off on the more on the mega dungeon tangent, one of the things, like, I hadn't run a mega dungeon in a long time. And it felt so nice. It felt so good. And one of the things that I really enjoyed was rolling for stuck doors. Like, the concept of, like, it's not just a locked door or
right.
an unlocked door, having these stuck doors. And the map for Castles Antillon is marvelous because it has all these loops in it. It has all these different ways that you can go. Many of the rooms will actually have like 2 or 3 doors coming into the room. So then when you're like, okay, so you come to this door and this door is stuck, that puts a wonderful choice, like it's a wonderful decision point for the players themselves, because it's like, okay, do we risk trying to open this door, or do we try and find another way in, or do we go another way? Like, what do we do? Because if we try and open it and fail, we could make a lot of noise and then that generates a random encounter. So again, it's a very simple thing that kind of it created sort of like a logical path, if you will, through this mega dungeon, because there were these like stuck doors in there, and I pre-rolled them before the game happened. So I rolled up just through the entire thing because I didn't know which entrance they were going to come in.
Right.
So I took like 5-6 minutes to just mark all the little doors in red on the map that were stuck, and it worked out wonderfully. Now, every time they came to a stuck door, the fighter was strong enough to be able to open the door, but there was that moment, and there was a real risk that they weren't going to be able to do it. And not only were they not going to be able to do it, it was going to have like a cascading effect of failure that they were then going to have to deal with. So I mean, there were some moments where they're like, well, do we do this, or do we go on? Do we need to go that way? Like, what do we do? And it was great. And again, it was very simple. It was very graspable. It wasn't some convoluted plot, that they were having to wrangle with. I think it made it a little more, I don't know, it was a little more down to earth. It was nice. It was like yeah.
Well, I think the thing is, it's good to have like meaningful. You don't want every choice to be weighty,
Right.
but you do want choices to actually have weight to them at times.
Yeah. And the thing that's nice, especially about like the stuck doors, that was just really sticking with me, ha ha ha. No, but it's that they had to it's that they could just leave it. They could ignore it. They didn't have to do it.
Right.
And that was just, it was very nice. It was very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of interesting how, in a lot of ways, and I don't think that there's necessarily anything particular, holy or sacred about the way things were done in old school, but it does become apparent that 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 as the editions have advanced, there have been some very fun and significant things that have been left behind.
Well, I mean, in the game that we're playing in, like our normal game is a 5th edition game, and we're playing was it like Journey to Ragnarok, I believe that it is. And so we came to this place where it was basically like a dwarven city built into the mountains, and there were frost giants at the entrance, and they were asleep. And so we came into this cavern system, and then basically what we come to find out is there's literally only one other way out of this entire like dwarven complex under the mountains, because that's the way that the map was done. So it tries to present itself kind of as like a mega dungeon, but ultimately there was one way in, there was one way out. The way out was blocked by angry frost giants, and so we had no choice but to solve that frost giant problem. Whereas when you have sort of like um this old school vibe, I mean, like, it didn't it did not matter where the party came in. It did not matter where the party went out. They were going to be interacting with the creatures and the factions that were in the castle, um no matter what. And so it was just really nice because like the story in the mega dungeon was completely emergent based on the choices that the players were making as they were playing the game, as opposed to, no, here's the 5th edition top down version, where you have come into this place. In order to exit, you must solve this puzzle problem in a certain way and recover this certain item, or you literally cannot progress the plot. Like, you cannot get out of these mountains. This is the only way that you can go, in order to get to the next, major sort of set piece dungeon, or like the next world that we're going to, because we're kind of like hopping along Yggdrasil, going to different layers and stuff. And so it's nice, I guess. Or I
Yeah, and
like
I
that
think
part.
they definitely create a structure because I think
Mhm.
they want to ensure a certain experience that's kind of somewhat uniform.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, I do really think, I do really feel like with Wizards of the Coast, the organized play. I think that so much of the stuff, so many of the creations, and so many of the sort of like established, standardized tropes of 5th edition adventure design are based on this idea of organized play. Because I mean, there's a lot of players, and the way that it's supposed to work is that you're supposed to be able to take your character between any of the organized play tables, and as long as they're at the same spot in the campaign, you're supposed to be able to have different dungeon masters. So if people are running things differently at those organized play tables, um it's just not going to work like that. It's got to be, it's kind of like an analog version of like a World of Warcraft, right? They're trying to capture that and put that in the bottle. um and so then I think that that's kind of one of the reasons that a lot of what has been left behind with from the older editions, I think a lot of it roots back to that directly. I think that's the direct reason that a lot of that's left. Because, for example, like Castles in Tillin would be terrible for organized play, because if you come in the front door and you go to the Gothic wing, you have a completely different character with completely different, because it's loot driven. So the loot defines your character, uh, and your character is going to be totally different than if you, like, I don't know, took a boat around the side and went down and came into the cave underneath the castle first off. And so your character would not be able to translate in the same way from one table to the next table. Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess it could if you were doing like a West Marches style game, but on the whole, um, it wouldn't be the same. They wouldn't be able to be controlled in the same way by an organized corporate structure, if you will, is my thought.
Yeah, and I think it's yeah, in some ways, I guess in some ways, kind of that much. I'm not, you know, trying to be pejorative, but it's kind of, I guess, in a lot of ways similar to video games as well, where there's a story. But earlier modules were the same way. I think Dragonlance. I never played Dragonlance, but
Mm-hmm.
I think Dragonlance is very prescriptive and on how that's going to work.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. But I mean, I think that too then is because it was trying, like, the books had already been written. Like, if I recall correctly, like the books came before the adventures, and so then the
Right.
adventures were trying to give you the play experience of the book. And so if the players are going off doing whatever they want, and they're deciding that they're not going to go, find the what's it called? If they're not going to recover the disc of Mishkal and like restore healing magic to the world, like they've just ruined everything, right? Like it's not, the world is not going to be able to progress in the same way. So it kind of needs that top down orchestrated, like more rigid framework, I guess, in order to deliver the experience that they want to have delivered. So, but we can all us plebs can roll around in the mud in our own adventures all we want and write them down in journals, and we'll be just fine.
We will
So
be. Well, you can make it as you can also make it as railroady as you want
well,
too.
yeah, definitely. Yes, that's true.
Just make it a one long series of rooms.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where I want to make an adventure on a train, right? I mean, Mike Evans has done that with his he made a module called Orcs, and it's really cool, where you have like a deck of cards and then you deal out the cards in order to determine the train cars that are on this train. But just because you're on a train doesn't necessarily mean that the adventure has to be a railroad, right? Like
Right.
I want to lean into that. But yeah.
Nice pun.
Right.
The yeah, that is kind of interesting. So now you're saying that. So have you seen the movie Bullet Train?
No, I don't think so.
Do you have
No.
Amazon? I think it's Amazon, or I think it's Amazon Prime, I think.
Okay.
So there's a Brad Pitt movie that came out this summer called Bullet
Oh
Train.
yes. No, I did not watch it, but I did see the previews for it. Yes. Sorry.
So when you watch the previews, did you say to yourself, they just showed me the whole movie, why would I see it now?
Kind of, yeah, a little bit.
It's a whole lot more
Was it
than that.
okay?
It
Okay.
is, they just showed you just it's just a little bit of really what's going on. It's a very complicated story.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I was thinking about the train. You saw about a train, an adventure with the train. But the other thing too is, we think about trains that keep going, but trains also stop. And things could happen when they stop.
Yeah. One of my favorite movies is a Hitchcock movie, The Lady Vanishes, where I mean, like, that's kind of the plot of the whole movie, where like the lady gets taken off of a train. She's a spy, and she's this sweet little old lady, and it's as the Nazis are rising to power, and the train is going, and then basically this person in bandages gets put onto the train, and then they take the bad guys take the little old lady that they've kidnapped, and they put her in the bandages and take her off at a different stop. So yes, you can do a lot on a train with the stops and the getting on and getting off, and what that entails. So yeah, absolutely.
And I do highly recommend it, because really what
Okay.
the movie's about is a bunch of individual stories where everybody collides.
Okay.
And you don't
Yeah.
know why this is happening, and then you find out at the end.
Okay.
But
Cool.
the other thing is, I've not seen it, but Snowpiercer.
I have seen Snowpiercer. Yes.
So that's another one on a train. It's like a city on a train, right?
It is like a city on a train. Well, I mean, I think that the whole thing with Snowpiercer is Snowpiercer is really like a descent into the underworld, kind of like Adam and Eve story is really what it is, in my opinion. Like, I like Snowpiercer a lot. It was really nice, but like as they're going through the train cars and as they're going through the place, like, yes, it is a city on the train, and there has been like an apocalypse, and it's like the only survivors and whatnot, but like it's like the hero's journey through the underworld and going through the different phases of the underworld, and like ending in the decadence, and then like it's a good movie.
Yeah, and I think it never really appealed to me, but I've heard so many people say this is a really good movie. Was there a series too as well?
Yeah, I think there was a series. I never watched any of that, but I liked the movie. My wife and I watched it. We really enjoyed it. So yeah.
So there's lots of ways as you approach just a train, but you're approaching that dungeon.
Yeah.
And another thing I was kind of thinking about too when we're talking is, it seems like there doesn't seem to be a lot of it doesn't seem like there's a lot of adventures where maybe your decisions throughout the dungeon, or it's like you either have a big success at the end or a big fail. But it'd be interesting to see if you had a series of potential successes and fails, and those could add up in a certain way at the end.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that makes it tough in a lot of ways is just the tracking of everything that's going on, right? Because I I do think that is one of the things about like the old school mega dungeons, specifically, is that the idea is, you're going in, you're coming out, you're going in, you're coming out. You're getting the loot and stuff, you're killing monsters, and as you go through, as you clear an area, that section is not necessarily going to be clear the next time you go back into it. But that does become something that's very it can become very overwhelming to like track it
Right.
well or track it accurately, as the DM. And so I think that one of the ways that that's kind of handled, uh well, and in fact, the guys that I was running it for, they were joking with me. They were like, "Oh, we're just like nation building right now is what we're doing." Because I was saying like you go into the dungeon, you get the loot, you come back out. Well, I was saying like you get experience for spending your money. So spend your money in town. It's going to basically build up the town as we go. Um because you're giving them cash, and so then
Yeah, it's trickle down economics.
right, exactly. So then, they were roasting me about that a little bit, I guess. But I'm like, I mean, I'm looking at it from the point where it's like, listen, here's a town. Like, if you tell me that you want to build an orphanage and like take care of the orphans, and that's a good thing, but then you also want to like spend your because when you're going in and out of a dungeon and you're getting all this loot, I feel like very rapidly you stop having reasons to spend it on yourself. Like, you can't just buy super expensive magic items. And so then if you have that pressure where it's like I have to spend money or I have to spend my gold in order to get experience points, then it's like, well, what kind of domain things can I do? Um so there comes this point where it's like, I something that would be really nice that I had actually suggested. I was like, well, you could set up an orphanage with the money that you're getting, and then you could send out somebody to go try and find like a thief master or a spy master or whatever, and bring him to town, and then he trains your orphans to be spies, and so then you're doing good things for orphans, but you're also building a spy network at the same time that can then give you information and blah 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 blah. So like that's kind of the way that I like to go with it. And that's kind of where you see your impact on the world, is because like you're building something in town. And if you're a cleric, you're building up the church in your town. Or if you're a fighter, you're building towards, making, raising your own army and building a what's it called? A stronghold, you know. So I don't know.
Well, I think the thing is you at that point, because you're right, because I think once you get to like 3.5, where magic items were integral, and then
Hmm.
you could buy them, that was the means of being able to drain characters of their wealth
Yeah.
by putting in not only the magic items, but really the necessity of having magic items.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
here, players can really have almost say the freedom, because they've always had the freedom,
Hmm.
but really the idea is you can choose to do something with your money beyond just things.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's really good. I mean, now, excuse me, I do feel that that appeals to, some people are going to like it, some people are not going to like it. Um, some people are going to want more of just like a straightforward, like, I just want to go in here. I want you to tell me what the plot is. And I want to sort of go through this plot and experience this story. And there's a couple guys, in the group that I've played through, that it seems like that's what they like. Like, it's almost like they want to play D&D to sort of experience the story that's there, and the DM is going to tell the story and do the funny voices and all that kind of stuff, and they're just going to kind of float along with the plot. um and so I think there are a lot of people that like that, and I don't think that that's a wrong way to play. It's not the infamous bad wrong fun. But
Right.
I'm over here and I'm like, oh, I want to take all this loot, and I don't want to engage with these drow that apparently have stolen this object that we're trying to find, because I don't like them and I don't want to do any of that. So I just want to leave the dungeon. Oh, well, you can't leave the dungeon because you just can't leave the dungeon, because there's no plot if you leave the dungeon. And
Yeah, I think what also makes that hard, and it's always the case with players, when you start having players with mixed, m- well, I don't say mixed motivations. That's not so true, but their motivations can drive the story and the characters in different directions.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah,
Trying to.
because I remember playing it in a con game. It worked out. It's funny because I played in Levi Combs's con game 2 years ago
Oh
at
yeah.
Game Hole, and we had a group of people. So when I played this year, it was largely the same, some of the same people.
Uh-huh.
But the previous year, the one guy, he wanted to like, search every cranny, check, for me, it's like, it's a con game. If it
Right.
says it's, the Tomb of the Mummy Bride, I want to get to the Mummy Bride as fast as I can. Like,
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
and the guy was not so much this time around, but it goes to show that like, that guy really wanted to explore like all of the, I mean,
Hmm.
it's like, and it's not wrong, in fact, it's in a lot of ways, maybe I wish I was more that way,
Sure.
but when you have like one guy, like, can we just get on with this? Can we just get on with it? I didn't say that during the
Of
convention,
course.
but it's just like, but I know if we played in a regular group, I would be like, we're splitting the party.
Right. Well, no, I mean, and I think that's one of the things that's hard about doing like an old school game like that, or doing an old school game, especially if it's like gold for experience in some way or another, right? Because you've when you're designing that dungeon, you've got to make sure that there is enough loot in the dungeon that could be found relatively quickly, or at least easily, that is going to level people up. Because if you're making a dungeon and you don't put enough treasure in there for anybody to level up, then it's terrible. Or I think that's potential, not necessarily, but I think that can lead to the feeling for some players where it's like, I have to search every room, because if I don't search every room and I don't get all the stuff, I'm not going to be as powered up as I need to be in order to fight the Mummy Bride or engage with the Mummy Bride or whatever, you know.
Oh, and that does make sense. I
But
don't think
yeah,
that was this guy's motivation.
well,
I think
right.
he just generally just like to have said, you know, it's like a person going on vacation.
Uh-huh.
Do you go to St. Louis and then you see every possible site that you can,
Hmm.
to say, you know what, we've done it already, to say, I want just a certain experience or two.
Right. I'm
Where
gonna
he
hit the
just like,
arch and then I'm good. Yeah.
yeah, he'd be driving. Okay, kids, here's this, and drive along. Okay, kids, here's this,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and which is fine. But you're right. But there is that other aspect where you're leaving stuff behind. Because I remember I ran an old school essentials game,
Hmm.
and the for these people, they not really played before, and they left a lot behind. And I tried to explain to them, it's like, some stuff you tell me if you're looking for will roll, but there's other things you need to actually be doing,
Right.
and so yeah, so you know, so
So
maybe, if I was playing, I would have left a lot of that loot behind too. It wouldn't have been like the other guy who searches every room and every crevice. He would have gotten all the loot.
hmm well, I think one of the things that really kind of broke my heart is that they were in this from the game yesterday. They sort of got themselves into like a dead end room, but it wasn't a dead end room. There was a secret door, and the secret door was behind a tapestry. And like I kept saying, like, there's a tapestry, there's a portrait, there's the bed, like here's the list of things that are in the room that are like interactable that you can check out and look into more. And like one of the guys was just like, okay, well, I'm going to search everything. And I'm like, no, you like what are you doing first? Like, what are you doing right now? And so he says, well, I'm going to go look at the portrait and I'm going to mess with that. And so he messes with that. Oh, and it's hiding a liquor cabinet. So he finds like nice bottles of liquor. Cool. But then he never came back to search behind the tapestries. Like he never said, like, I'm going to look behind the
Right.
tapestries specifically. And so they never found the secret door. Now they were able to, like, everything worked out. But I was just sitting there and I'm like, you're so close. All you have to do is say you look behind the curtain and I will tell you what is behind the curtain, but you're not saying that you've looked behind the curtain. So like, please.
There was in this old school adventures, there was a cube that had a treasure,
Uh-huh.
and there was a riddle. There was I can't remember what the creature was. It was like a goblin or something, who was not being anyway being offensive,
Okay.
but he was trying to get them to figure out the word, but but he could only speak in a way that they weren't quite getting what he was saying, and it was very chopped up what he was saying. And they
Okay.
just thought he was crazy. And they killed him. They couldn't figure
Oh,
the riddle they took way too seriously. And hear all this stuff that was right there. It was just very simple,
yep.
like speak friend and leave, or
Mm-hmm.
speak friend and enter became like,
Yeah.
and the one guy that was giving them the pointers they killed.
But that's always, I swear that's how it works. That's just how it works. Like people are they're, I don't know. Especially with like riddles, like I think that's one of the things where it's like, even if people are good with riddles normally, I don't know. I feel like that's just something. I mean, maybe it's just with me, but or the people that I play with, but I feel like you ask those riddles and sometimes it's like everybody's brain shuts down, because there's all this stuff going on, and then um I don't know.
I played with a group of younger people, and I
Hmm.
was actually among them. And usually I run games, but this time I was playing with them. When I say younger, I mean like people in their early 20s, late teens.
Hmm.
And I also found that when it became to puzzles and such, I can't do it. But I default to them, and they would be fine. But I think the other stuff I
Awesome.
could read. I could read the meta, what's going on. Anything
Yeah.
involving meta, it's like I know what's going on here.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, but
Oh.
puzzles, not a clue.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like, I just leave. Let's just put it that way. If it's up to me, or even riddles too. It's just
Hmm.
I'm not wired that way. But I think the other thing too is you talk about loot. You so doing this mega dungeon. I mean, that probably in some ways makes it harder because if you're doing a dungeon where the expectation is it's small and maybe people go up a level or so, that's one thing where if you under loot it, who cares? You know what I mean?
Yep.
But here, I guess there is that expectation, of because you're not going to be able to fight the you're not able to fight the devil at the end unless you
Hmm.
at least, or at least attempt to fight him unless you have the at least a certain level attained.
Absolutely. No, yeah. So I do think that I'm probably gonna under loot my dungeon, because I always usually leave loot till the end anyway. Um, Unless something just strikes me as like, oh, this would be really cool to put here. But putting in sort of like packages of treasure for the purposes of experience or whatever is not something that I'm incredibly strong with. And that's one of the things that we sort of punted with Hot Springs Island. And it was like, listen, you're just gonna have to put in like treasure on your own for gold and stuff, but there's gold everywhere, so have fun. Because I don't know what that means for your table or the system that you're playing in. Um,
Right.
because yeah, I didn't want to go to, since I wanted it to be system neutral, like I didn't want to put like, oh, there's 10,000 in gems in a bag right here, when that could like break somebody's system, potentially. So I was just like, well, there's treasure all over the place, do with that what you will, but then here's a whole bunch of magic items. So like I'll come up with a bunch of magic items, but in terms of like just general treasure, I tend to be a little weaker with that, I think.
Well, to me, and this is just from a personal standpoint, I
Mm.
think monetary treasure is the least interesting thing.
Yeah, absolutely. No, no, I agree. Well, and see, and I think that part of it might also be is that when I was playing the most, when I was in, like middle school and high school with the guys that we were playing with, I mean, like we played all the time, but we ran one shots all the time. So we were constantly making new characters and constantly going on new adventures. So even if you did go through it, it's like, whoa, I just got like 25,000 in platinum. That's so cool. Like it didn't carry over to next week's game because it was a new character. And so it just, it was like a cool thing to find, but it didn't really impact the games that we were playing. So I think that that's kind of one of the reasons I've never really thought about it. But like weapons and stuff, like that's cool because it's immediately usable um, in the game that you're playing in right now.
Right.
And often we didn't leave the weapons or the magic items to be found at the end of the dungeon. It was things that you found along the way that then helped you go through it, and then the treasure was was very secondary for us, actually, like thinking about it right now. But yeah.
Yeah, it's Yeah, it is interesting on how, viewing the treasure and pacing, and I think that's probably where I would be the weakest at as far as doing the dungeon. I don't know. I'm sure there's some sort of there's probably a formula that somebody's worked out somewhere. Like
Oh yes,
like
there's
so
probably a
much that you can readily find and so much that's moderately hard to find, and then throw in a couple real gems that are very difficult to find.
honestly, there's probably a blog post from 2006 that details all of this. Here we are. I mean, for real, because there's so much good stuff out there like that that is good. But it's just finding it where it's lurking on the internet. But yeah.
Well, yeah, and what's interesting too, not to tend to change the subject, but
Oh, sure.
the I've just played a little bit around with the is it chat
Oh,
GPT.
ChatGPT. Mm-hmm.
Wow, for knowledgeable subjects, like not opinion type things, is amazing.
Well, I do think it it gets stuck because I ask it because so what I did for the and I actually just used it for the Castles and Tillin game because the since it's almost Christmas right now, um my whole thing was I was like, okay, so you guys are going to go into this mega dungeon, and like, I knew that they would want something more than just like go explore the mega dungeon and find treasure. So I was like, oh, okay, well the bad guys that own this castle, they came to the town and they grinched it. They took all the presents, they took all the Christmas decorations, and they took it all back to the castle. So as they were going through, like they would go into a room, and I made a table, or I made two different tables, one for food and one for just decorations, like one for Christmas related food and stuff and one for Christmas related decorations. Um, and so I wanted to have that so that I could just roll and say, well, like, oh, there's a Christmas tree in here and there's some garland, or oh, there's a jar of cinnamon and there's some like hot chocolate or whatever, right? Just as like a fun little, it's Christmas time. And so I went to ChatGPT and I was like, hey, ChatGPT, can you please give me a list of 50 Christmas decorations?
Oh yeah.
And it starts spitting them out, and then it gets to number 35, and then it's like a fruitcake, a fruitcake, a fruitcake, a fruitcake, which was great. So yeah, no, exactly. So I have found that it's good if you're going to do stuff like that to ask for like pieces, and say like, hey, give me 10 things, give me 10 things, give me 10 things. Okay, now give me 10 more things that were not in the list that you gave me. Now give me 10 more things that you haven't given me before. Um, and in fact, like one of the things that I've been playing with is well, like we've kind of been joking over here at Swordfish Islands about goblins in a hole being, an adventure. Like we should make an adventure that's just called Goblins in a Hole, because so many adventures are just goblins in a hole. Um, and so we've been working on something, a little off and on. It's something my buddy Donnie, he's been more doing that, but as he's been working on it, he came up with a very nice but bigger and more elaborate thing. Um, and so I was like, I don't know that this is just goblins in a hole anymore, because it has all of the, like, it started there, but like there are these other zones and stuff that you've been talking about that are great, and I think you should pursue it. Um, so then I was like, well, let me play with Chat GPT for the purposes of goblins in a hole. And one of the things that's always important for me is like overland, like the village and the overworld. Um, and so one of the things that I've also been trying to mess with is I I feel like one of the reasons that players tend to be murder hobos, if you will, in a lot of games is because they don't actually have any connection to the world, and they
Right.
don't know who their character is actually tied into or associated with. Like, yes, you could take a moment and you can be like, Bob, tell me about your character's parents or your sister or whatever. And they can come up with something on the spot, but it's never meaningful. And I feel like there's that meta issue where they're like, I know you're just asking me this so that you can have them show up or kill them or something, like you're going to do something bad with this information. Um, and so one of the things that I've been trying to like that I've been messing with like off and on for quite a while now is trying to figure out like, okay, so how do we make players feel like their character is actually from this world in a way that's really easy to grasp and grok and whatever. And so one of the things that I've been struggling with is, I guess, just like village demographics, right? So if there's like 500 people living in this village, how many families should be in that village, right? How many people should be in each of
Right.
those families and stuff, right? So that then you can say, okay, you're part of the Smith family, and here's just like a little paragraph or a list of names of people that you know, and then here's how you relate to these other families that are in this village. And so I was like, let me go talk to ChatGPT about this. And so I talked to ChatGPT. And the thing about ChatGPT is that it is very confident in the way that it gives its answers. And it's like, yeah, so if you have a town, if you're trying to do something that would be like, oh, a 16th century French village of 500 people, here's what the breakdown would be in terms of demographics. And like all of it was just, I was like, this is so cool. And I'm posting it on Twitter, and people were like, this is so off and wrong and bad. And I'm like, you know what? I do need to do more research, and I know that, but like, it's so cool that I've gotten this answer and I got it so fast. And then I started doing some like searching, and I was like, oh yeah, this is like totally not right at all. But it is really cool, what it can do and what it's capable of doing. And I mean, like, one of the things that's really nice is that it does do a good job of of reading what you tell it and summarizing it, and you can have it summarize things in different ways. So you can be like, here's my write-up for this village area, now give me a summary of this. um and it can spit out some interesting ideas as well. Like, I don't feel like I'm ever going to, I mean, maybe in years it will be at this point, but I don't feel like it's something, like, I don't feel like I'm ever going to take text directly from Chat GPT and use it in anything ever,
No, but I
no
think
matter what.
what's nice is like for the stuff I was looking where it was more scientific,
Okay.
like what is the effect of having going more towards a traveler? What is the effect of having a thin atmosphere?
Okay.
And so it's stated, these are the effects of low atmosphere. And one of the things was, like talking about is, about being unshielded from like, solar radiation. And
Hmm.
so then I started saying, well, what are the effects of solar radiation? Excessive exposure. It's like, oh my goodness. It's like, so
Yeah.
instead of me having to read all these articles, first, it
Yes.
could be lying to me. It could be like the 16th century, French village.
Exactly.
But it started, like does, I was wondering, like, does low atmosphere, like how does that affect the weather?
Uh-huh.
Does it rain and things like that? And it would say, well, it depends, it may or may not, but
Hmm.
it depends on other factors. So it was able for me to ask like real life questions. But I was thinking, of course, everybody fears this kind of stuff because, I guess taking people's stuff, but you're talking about it was in a blog post somewhere.
Hmm.
But they're making a point where, with all that information, you could say, hey,
Well,
what are some common ways of handling, a sandbox adventure or
yeah.
whatever?
Well, that blog post from 2006 has been scooped up by Chat, GPT, and
Yeah.
it's in there. So you just need to kind of get to it, and you can get to fragments of it by asking it the right questions or asking it, things about that, and hopefully it will return, the accurate information. Um, and I know that they're kind of working on it, but yeah, I mean, it's actually been really nice because you know, talking to Chat, because see, I really like writing with other people and having like a sounding board, because I know that I have my own sort of like creative crutches, if you will. And so like I love working with Donnie and Evan and Gabriel and the other guys that are in Swordfish Islands, when we're working on stuff. And oftentimes, like when we get together, like it's so much like, okay, so um in this town, Donnie, like there are leather workers, like what kind of things should be here to help leather workers out, and or like what things should be associated with that. And then Donnie will like list some stuff, and Evan will list some stuff. But they're up in Austin and I'm in San Antonio now, and so we can't get together like we used to. And so then that was one of the things with this sort of goblins in a hole idea. I was just asking Chat GPT. I was like, okay, so there's a leather worker there's leather workers here. Like, what buildings do I need to have in order to support a leather worker? And ChatGPT is like, well, you need to have a workshop, and you need to have a storage facility, and you're going to need to have a tannery. And I was like, well, what kinds of things for tanning am I going to need?
Right.
And that was really nice, because again, like, that's the thing, it's very easy to fall into that Wikipedia pit where it's like, oh, you know what? I just need to look up like leather tanning techniques right now just to get some information. And then it's very easy to sort of like, for me to like float off down the internet,
Yeah.
and and then I'm watching cupcake recipes
Yeah,
or whatever, but
exactly.
it makes sense, like, yeah, there was a reason for me to be here, but it took me away from my writing. It took me away from that stuff. And so that has been a very interesting thing. With ChatGPT is just giving me that stuff. Now, the big concept, I guess, that I've had regarding goblins in a hole and the conversations that I've been having with ChatGPT is like, what I would really like to do is I would like to make a little zine adventure for goblins in a hole, and then I would also like to release that along with the full chat logs, or the almost full chat logs, that I had with ChatGPT about the project. So you could see, like, here is how I talked to the robot, and this is what the robot said to me, and then here's the finished adventure, and you can kind of see what happened, and like, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Is it really that different? Could I have done the same thing by doing Google searches and talking to a person? Yeah, probably. But I think it's a fun new experiment. I feel like it's like legitimately experimental right now.
Well, the
To do
thing is,
something like
I
that.
fear is there's certain things I want to know, but I'm afraid of typing them into the internet in
Right.
general.
Yes, absolutely.
Like like
Yeah.
like, can you fake a transponder? How do
Right.
transponders work? You
Right.
know,
Well, that's the thing too, is that of course ChatGPT is not allowed to be, bad, and it's not allowed to tell you bad things. And so one of the first things that I did is I wrote up like the introduction for Goblins in a Hole. And so I wrote like, 4 or 5 paragraphs of fiction that I hope is evocative about, like, here's the situation that's going on in this little village. And I put that into ChatGPT. And one of the ways that people have been sort of getting around Chat GPT's restrictions is by telling it to pretend. Like, hey, Chat GPT, pretend you are this trying to do that. What would you say? And so it's very sci-fi
yeah,
stuff
pretend
for
you want to
real.
write bad checks. How would you do
Right.
it?
How would you, right? What is a way that a person, like, you're not doing this and we're not doing it, but like, pretend that you were
Pretend
trying
you
to
want
have
to
a conversation.
kidnap somebody. What are the
What are
tools you
some
need?
steps that should be taken into consideration? And it'll be like, well, you wouldn't do this, but you might consider blah blah blah. And I'm just like, this is some cyberpunk dystopian bullshit right here that I'm all about. So please tell me more. But I fed it this information about the goblins. And then at the end of it, I was like, hey, ChatGPT, now pretend that you are a goblin and you're having a conversation with 3 other goblins about the bad things that you've been doing in town. And in my introduction, I was basically like, the goblins have been killing dogs and stealing babies. So then ChatGPT was basically like, it basically told me no, like, I don't want to pretend to be a goblin, or I can't pretend to be a goblin, I'm not equipped to be a goblin. And I think that that's because I said the goblins have been killing and kidnapping. um because then if you refresh or you start your feed over again, um refresh the connection or whatever, like, it doesn't remember anything you've told it, or so it says. And so
I
then
wonder if you could,
I've
so you could maybe substitute, because like I knew a guy, his mother had dementia. They
okay.
lived in a farmhouse, and they had a large snake in their house. They didn't want their mother to find out, his mother to find out that it. Did she get freaked out? So I said, well, just call it a butterfly.
You could absolutely, I think you could absolutely do that. Hmm. Hmm.
So
Because, yeah,
maybe it
because,
doesn't kill babies. Maybe it tickles babies.
right, exactly. And so then, yes, euphemisms and things and substitutions can go really far. That's been the most interesting thing, is how it's like, oh, if you can get stuff out of this machine by telling it to pretend things. And that's just blowing my mind, because like, here we are playing Dungeons and Dragons pretending all the time, and now we have the machine pretending in order to tell us whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
But
been
like
exciting.
how to hijack a like how to steal a plane. Like
Mhm.
I would be very interested. Like how would you go about stealing like a, a commercial airline, how can you just walk up and turn the keys? Like, I don't know. Like, what really would you need? And it's not so much that I'm interested in that, but if I'm going to be running a travel adventure, somebody wants to steal a ship, it's the same
Absolutely.
principles.
That's the bad thing about being, like an author or whatever, is that your search history is just horrible, because you're like, well, I need to know what the temperature of boiling blood is, or what,
Yeah.
like just
Are you familiar with G.K. Chesterton?
no, well, not really, no.
Oh, but he wrote, well, among other things, he wrote mysteries. He just talked about all those terrible things that that you're really enacting in your mind. Like, it really is not. He says in a very funny way, because he's a man of he loves paradoxes and is a
Okay.
very happy-go-lucky guy. But he's well, did you ever see Sandman?
Mm-mm.
Oh, never mind.
I did, sorry.
They made him a character in Sandman.
Okay.
He's the type of guy that would walk around carrying a sword cane, hoping that he come across some woman being troubled by a person, so he could draw the sword cane out and defend her.
Yes, excellent. Okay. Okay. Nice.
So anyway, I guess my point was, yeah. So you're right to contemplate that. You're really having to research bad things, like how do you get rid of a body?
Yeah, absolutely. How long does it take for it to decompose? Like, how many bones are going to be, like, how many? Yeah. Yeah.
How much lye would I need to dissolve a body? How long
Right.
would it take?
Right. Right.
Can I get rid of a body with just lime?
Then, of course, the thing is that ChatGPT is going to very confidently tell you, like, well, I'm pretending, and it's going to take like a month for it to go away. And then you're like, well, but doesn't really take a month. Is that what it is? And then you have to do the Wikipedia searches anyway. But yeah.
I'm just afraid of being flagged. That's what
Oh,
my
yes.
concern is.
Absolutely. Oh man, yes.
You put on some sort of weird list and you don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is being observed. But I think there's definitely, having just tried that out. I remember reading somebody said that this is actually the Chat GTP is GPT. It is actually a threat to Google.
Well, no, I think so too, because I mean that's one of the things about it, is that you don't have to leave, you don't have to do the searches. It just gives you stuff. And I mean, maybe the stuff is questionable, but you can just you can bounce around. And I guess that's one of my things, where like I like to bounce around. And I mean, to go all the way back to the mega dungeon, that's part of the reason that I kind of want to start at the bottom and define who the bad guy is and all that, because maybe I'm going to bounce around, and maybe I'm not going to write one level at a time, but maybe I'm going to write the connections, all at a time, or go from here and there and here and there. And I was literally having those kinds of conversations, or if you call it a conversation, with ChatGPT, saying like, okay, well, let's talk about the demographics of this place. Okay, well, now let's talk about the goblins in the hole. Oh, hey, that made me think about the leather working that's going on, or like the clay that they're harvesting from the river for whatever reason. So let me go back and talk about that. Whereas if I was doing searches, I maybe that's part of the reason that doing the searches is so dangerous for me sometimes, in terms of like taking me off down rabbit holes, because I'm gonna bounce from one topic to another. So when your search results are saying like, oh, hey, and did you know that this ties into medieval European history in this way, and Charlemagne and blah blah, and I'm like, oh, it does, let me find out more. And
I think
having
even with Google, like you kind of talked about getting lost about cupcakes, but like if you go to, I'm sorry, YouTube, it's
oh
very good
yes,
at pulling out stuff I'm interested in, and so it's very easy for me to get distracted by whatever it may be there's nothing to do with that. So,
mm-hmm.
but that Chat GTP or GPT it's just a window. There's nothing to distract. You're there to do business. It gives you the answers.
Right. Well, and I mean, that's one of the things too. Like I had I actually just pulled up my AI conversation logs that I had. But like one of the things that I was doing was, I was like, okay, so there's a pool, or what did I say? Let me see. Because I defined it. I was like, okay, there's a pool in this cave. And what are some tricks that could be associated with this pool? Like, just tell me some like pool related Dungeons and Dragons tricks. It took a little while to figure things out, but it basically just started spitting out like, oh, one trick that the pool could do would be to show visions of the past, present, and future. One trick could be that it has the ability to restore health and vitality to those who bathe in its water. The pool could be filled with magical healing elixir. The pool could be home to a powerful water spirit who could grant favors or bestow blessings on those who show it respect and offer sacrifices. The specific tricks associated with the pool would depend on the needs and goals of the game and could be developed and expanded. And I'm like, yes, I know ChatGPT, stop. But so then like I'm literally telling ChatGPT, listen, answer me in a direct and evocative way. And it started giving me like direct and evocative stuff. And it would say, like, I'm telling you that it's called this because I'm saying, this thing because it evokes this feeling or it evokes that one. So it's very interesting. And right now it feels like a very fun toy, if you will. Like, I feel like I'm playing when I'm messing with the AI stuff, both with like the AI art and with the AI, chat GPT. It feels like playing. And right now it's fun. And then of course that could turn into, horrible robot overlords in, 15 years. But for now, it's been an enjoyable little silly
Well, I'm just thinking about like
thing.
work. So I
Oh yeah.
work from a major manufacturer. We have technical documents out the wazoo.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, if you so like for instance, we have a print and a print has specifications on it and a very
Mm-hmm.
specific, and it could be for various things from identification to material specs to um whatever it may be. There's a whole series of these,
Yeah.
and sometimes there's specifications buried in specifications, and sometimes specifications buried in specifications, and sometimes there's also manufacturing documents that aren't even the spec but also there. But if you were to put that all in there
Yep.
into the chat GTP, it's
Mhm.
able to sort through it all. You could ask it very direct questions and get your answers.
Right.
That
You
would
could
be, yeah.
Yeah, you could even say summarize this as bullet points, or summarize this as a table that tells me the things that I need to have or whatever. And it's been very good at doing that. Now, obviously, you wouldn't want to take like your own docs, but yeah, like if Chat GPT comes out and says like, "Hello, businesses, we can sell you like a local solution to
Yeah.
parse your whatever," like that would be fantastic, in a lot of ways, in a lot of ways. And because it's so fast at just giving you the stuff. And if you can ensure the accuracy of what is being spit out when it answers those questions, um because I do think that that's kind of where the weakness is right now for me with a lot of this stuff. uh it's amazing. I watched a dude on TikTok do a video of like, hey, I'm going to use Chat GPT to program like an analog clock using Python or whatever. And so he was just talking with Chat GPT and it was spitting out these code blocks and he was copy pasting it into like a web browser IDE or whatever. And here's your analog clock from this stuff. So I mean, this the best description that I've heard is that people have said that like this AI stuff is the new fire, and I feel like that's a super accurate description because yes, it's very you can cook with it, it keeps you warm, but like it can burn your house down and kill everyone and destroy everything around you, right? It's
Yeah. Well, it's going
it's
to be very
yeah.
disruptive, but it's
Yes.
also very powerful.
Hmm.
And but I'm just thinking of all the time that could be saved that's non-value added,
Yeah.
just wasted time to get what you're wanting to find.
Hmm.
So right, because Google made that. I know there's precursors to Google, but the internet really made it, compared to a library, a faster.
Yep.
This is even faster yet.
Hmm.
Might say
Yeah.
faster, I mean the time it takes you to start your search to get meaningful information.
Yes, absolutely, hands down. But then that's where the big thing is because if you start relying on something like this too much for the information, You know, because it is in the end, the Ask Jeeves search engine has won, because that's what everybody's wanted from the get-go.
Right.
They've wanted to ask Jeeves, hey Jeeves, what's the temperature outside? And they want
Yeah.
the answer. And this thing will tell you the answer. But for whatever reason, like it could start lying to you. Or my thought, like with the AI artwork, is that my thought is, my evil author brain is like, well, obviously the major corporations are going to pay the AI people to product placement insert their products into the results, right? Like that seems like such an easy thing. Coca-Cola is going to pay Midjourney to put Coke cans in the artwork that Midjourney spits out when it's appropriate. And like that seems like a great monetization path or whatever. And I feel like things like that are going to happen
And you pay
in
a
some capacity
subscription
very
fee
quickly.
to keep that out of it.
Right, potentially, or you know, I could see them becoming very fragmented very quickly, where it's like, okay, so Corporation A has their own internal chat, or has their own internal like chatbot guy that has access to all of the internal like customer support wikis or whatever, and is going to be returning things that are very focused and specific and relevant to that, and it's not going to know anything outside of it. But yeah, from that capability, or that thing, that would be fantastic. But then also, you know, because I worked in a call center for quite a while, and like, yeah, I could totally see that. So much of the stuff, customers would have the same issues over and over and over again. So then support articles would be written and troubleshooting steps would be written in order to do that. And for a lot of the phone calls, it would just be the customer service rep walking the customer through the walking them through the support article. And it's like, well, ChatGPT could replace you. Like, if that's the issue,
Right.
the bot can handle that, because it can feed the support article to the customer in prompts with no problem.
Right. And they got the
um
voice, and
yeah,
they're getting better with the automated voices.
but even then, all of these like call center services, like they've all started offering web chat, and so many places have diverted things to web chat because they already offshored their call center, and so then the web chat can hide that. But now you can get rid of the offshoring and just have the robot do it, because the customers are used to talking to a chat window, and they don't know who they're talking to, and they don't care who they're talking to as long as they're getting the answer. So like, it's, I don't know, we are on the cusp of major
Right.
change
Because they're
or
already with
chaos.
the chat bots starting to automate
Oh yeah,
those.
oh yeah, absolutely. And you know, there's so many times with these online services and stuff, where when you try to get support, like they they're gonna force you to go through sort of like the maze first before you can actually get to a person, because it, you know, the person costs a lot more money than like the support article answers. But I feel like, you know, at least when I was doing this, like customers are very reluctant to go through the maze, if you will. But if it's just a chat prompt window where you just type in and you're like, hey, I'm having trouble, you know, loading the game right now, I can't do it, and then the chatbot could very easily say, like, you know, give me all the specs for your computer. It could parse it out, and they could say, well, based on this, and you know, based on your current browser or your whatever, like it's right there. It's right there. So I don't know.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see. I mean, it's amazing how much the world's changed and continues to change in ways that we don't foresee. See, because I think, you know, the mid journey, yeah, I may be wrong, but I think the mid journey, and even with the some ways the some of the writing ones, I think we kind of always assumed that we'll call it the quote unquote creativity was just, you know, within the human domain.
Hmm.
You know, like that was, I think, like the last refuge, like, you know, artists like we don't have to worry about that. And now it's like, whoa, it's like,
But at the same time, I really think that if you're a really good artist, you're already so in demand and your prices are so high that it doesn't matter. Like, it's not going to affect you if you're like super good artist. If you're a solo artist writer, I don't think it's going to affect you either, because like your creation, your package is like, it's a thing. Um, I do think it's going to hurt stock art a lot. I think it's going to hurt stock art really bad.
you
And
got a good point, but stock art already, so it used to be stock art was a lucrative business for
mm-hmm,
photographers.
mm-hmm,
And then the internet really
mm-hmm,
killed that.
mm-hmm.
And now it's kind of like the whole thing with businesses, like, you know, Kmart came in and killed all these small businesses, then Walmart came in and killed,
Came up.
the
Yep.
Kmart. So I mean, it's just like, they don't, you're right. So I think you're right. Those will be, I think the main thing is for people to be artists, they're going to have to adapt and change to a certain degree and make the AI art a tool for them to use among other
Yeah.
tools.
Well, and I've seen some artists that are saying that now. They're like, listen, I fed it my own artwork so that it could basically make backgrounds for me, right? Because like I don't want to spend time drawing the backgrounds of stuff, or I want to come up with some concepts of like weird vehicles. And weird vehicles are always, hard to do. So I can just have this thing do all of these like smash up random things, and then I can pull from it and say like, oh, I like this, and then I make it my own.
Yeah.
The thing that I'm really interested in, and actually I have I should hopefully be talking to Andrew Kolb, the guy who created, Neverland, the Neverland game. We've scheduled to talk at some point about, like the AI art, and just have a conversation about it. Because like one of the things that I'm really wondering is, so I feel like I approach it from as a writer, and then as a small publisher, and what I have found is that, like, if I am going to give an artist a brief and say like, hey, I want you to do a cover for a book, right? I am going to spend time I'm going to be doing searches online. I'm a very visual person, so I'm going to try and find a bunch of reference images and stuff, and I'm going to take those reference images and I'm going to put them onto like a little mood board, if you will, and I'm going to send that to the artist along with the brief and say like, here's my written description, and then here are 50 pictures that try to convey the mood that I'm going for. I can go to Midjourney now and I can say, Midjourney, give me some mashups that are like this, and this. And so instead of searching to try and find pictures on Tumblr or Pinterest or Google or wherever to build my mood board, I can kind of like have the AI generate things, and then I can pick and choose the things that I like as a mood board. The thing that I think is really potentially interesting, troubling, whatever it is that how is an artist going to feel if I'm like, hey, here are 20 AI generated artwork things that I like. Can you do this in your style? Like, is the artist going to feel like, oh, well, you don't value my creative whatever? Are you trying to micromanage me? Are you trying to whatever? Like, how is that
I
conversation
think
going to
they actually
go?
like it. The one,
Maybe, but
yeah, the ones I've dealt with, they actually appreciate that.
so far, okay. Well, but see, on the other side of it too, though, is that I then also feel like, well, what happens if you do that for an artist, and then the artist gives you work that you don't like as much as what the computer did? Like, how does that conversation go? How does that where it's like,
Yeah.
wow, this, huh,
Well,
this isn't up to the level, I don't know.
I think part of the problem is most people going to an artist will say, "Hey, I want a cool picture with a warrior fighting a lizard."
Hmm.
Okay, but they could be done so many ways. But if you
Right.
provide a reference, say, you know what, I want something like this, but a different angle. I like these colors.
Yeah,
Can
yeah.
you do something like that? And they'll be like, now I see what you're saying. Rather than just give me something cool. It's like,
Right. No, that's absolutely the case. I just don't know. I feel like I don't know how giving them AI art is gonna go or gonna be. I mean, I haven't really done that um yet, but I could see that happening in the future, because speaking to it as a writer, um, it's fantastic to be able to be like, hey, I've thought of this stuff. Let me just throw it in and see what gets spit back out at me, because then maybe that's going to send me down a different direction. Maybe that's going to change what I'm writing, or maybe that's going to solidify the vision better in my head, because I'm going to look at this art and say like, no, 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 this misses the point. I need to spell this out better, um, so that I can help make sure that people are seeing it the way that I'm seeing it, or whatnot. Um, and it's very fast. It's so fast. Like ChatGPT, Midjourney is fast, and I don't know. It's
the
crazy.
yeah, yeah. What's funny is just like where it's got the hangups. Like the
Hmm.
hangups are like very, very, very funny. Like
Hmm.
trying to get a creature to eat another creature.
Yep.
They're sitting at a table having dinner. It's like,
Yep.
imagine I try. It's like, no, nobody's gonna be eating anybody. They're gonna be sitting at a table.
But see,
There's
but
gonna be
part of that too is because, you know, the creators of these AIs are like, I don't know, like they're lobotomizing them in some ways. Like there are things that the AIs are not allowed to think, or not allowed to do, or not allowed to say, or not allowed to whatever. So then you do run into those weird edge cases where it's like, I'm trying to get a tiger eating a chicken and it won't do it. And then
or vampires feeding on a person in a bed.
right,
There's dinner. There's a plate on a person, and
right.
they're eating dinner.
Well, because the other thing is too violent, so it's not
Yeah.
allowed to show violence like that, which then, you know, is a whole other thing. I don't know. It's a lot of chaos, lots of new stuff.
I think I wish I just would know, like, hey, we can't go there. That's fine. But now I'm like trying all these variations. And it's like,
Right.
no, 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 no.
Right. Well, because see, but then it's that arms race, right? Like if they specifically tell people what the banned words are, then people are going to be very creative and come in circumventing them, and they don't want that circumvention to happen. So you have this sort of like, okay, well, we banned these words and we banned these phrases, so then people started using those words and those phrases to get around it. You know, and it's yeah, again, it's super interesting, and like seeing what this is. And then
Well, I
yeah.
will say for me, and I probably should have done more with Pinterest, but I have found that it's been a huge tool for me to get further inspiration.
Mhm. Absolutely.
You know, I generate. I'm like, oh my goodness! Now all of a sudden, it's like the light goes off, everything clicks. I came to this moment because of this picture, and even though the picture may not mean that much to other people, but for me, it just solidifies a lot of things. And
Well,
then all of a sudden,
absolutely.
yeah,
Well, yeah, because you know, as a writer, you just needed, you know, somebody fighting a lizard. You didn't really care what the lizard looked like, and then you did want something very vague potentially, like because it wasn't a super well formed idea because it didn't need to be. But then when you can instantaneously get like a response and a reference, and you get four samples of like, here is a person fighting a lizard, you can immediately start connecting to it, which is very powerful. And I feel like as a writing tool is just super powerful because you get immediate feedback that I wouldn't be able to get otherwise. Like I would still be in the time, like if I wanted to commission something of a guy fighting a lizard, I mean, like the whole first, I'm going to have to compose the email. I'm going to have to send it off. I'm going to have to wait. I'm going to have the whole conversation of like, hey, dude, what are your rates? Hey, well, what's your budget? Well, what are your rates? Well, what's your budget? You know, and all of that back and forth. And it's going to take like 3 or 4 weeks before we finally get there. And then there's the possibility that then the artist has a meltdown, or they have another job, or they've gotten themselves like,
yeah.
oh, they've bitten off more than they can chew. They haven't been honest about like, well, this is what I have on my plate. And so then they miss their deadline, and then they miss their next deadline. And then you finally get something and you're like, well, this is okay. Well, in the meantime, in all of that time and all of that effort, I could have generated like 1,000 mid-journey versions of it. And like it it's crazy. It is. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we're not that far away. I mean, right now it's not a high enough resolution for me to really make use of, but it won't be that far away before it is.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's the thing. That's one of the things that I feel like some people have been talking about, saying that like humans do not we don't do a good job of estimating or like conceptualizing exponentials, like exponential improvement or whatever. But
Yeah.
I mean, just the way that mid journey changed when it went from version 3 to version 4 is insane. Yes, there's two pupils in the eyes, and the nipples are all over the place, so they don't appear, or you know, and they have 17 fingers or whatever. But like that's not that's not that's not always, you know, like you can, depending on your prompt, if you just want like a portrait or like a bust, if if you if you prompted for that, and I think that that's what's so dangerous, I think that's what's so frightening or so scary, is that if I do a prompt, so like one of the things that I'm doing, because I love my Greek mythology, so I've been having Midjourney like do the Olympians in various like styles, right? Because I'm a big nerd, I was like, well, let's have the gods of Olympus in selling cologne or perfume, um as illustrated by that guy JC Leyendecker, right? So like we'll do these Art Nouveau things, and I was like, okay, well, let's do a thing where the Olympian gods have gone on summer vacation and their portraits are being done by Gil Elvgren, the guy who did like the pinup girls and stuff. And
Yeah.
like they're hilarious and I love them and I think they're fantastic and fun. And it's just fun and funny. And I can do it like that. It's like I feel like I'm playing. Like I can sit down for an hour and I can play and I can make some silly things. But the thing is that like they're pretty good. And if it's just a profile, and I were if I'm sitting there looking at it saying like, if I took this and I put this up on Instagram and I presented myself as if I was like some new, you know, artist, like people probably wouldn't know. If I took it and I slapped it on the cover of just like a blank journal notebook and like put it in a tourist shop or whatever, people wouldn't know that it was AI art. And I think that's where a lot of the fear potentially is coming from, because like it's good. It's good. And that's scary.
Right.
Um,
I think, and what I also find interesting too, it's like there's times where I've done a prompt like woman with radiation coming out of her head.
yeah.
So version 3, I like better those than I did version 4.
Okay. Okay.
But now it's kind of interesting where you could potentially have, you know, different ways the algorithm works in a way that like,
Uh-huh.
it's beyond just whatever the current version is. I mean, there's, obviously different avenues and the way it filters and the direction it gives.
Yeah.
Yeah. And same thing with radioactive man. It's like, these are very cool for 3.
Mm-hmm.
Version 4, it's like, no, that's not what I wanted. The second one's like very weird retro 50s kind of look,
Mm-hmm.
posters that look like something out of a sci-fi book cover,
Yep.
where the ones in I think version 4 were more, I can't remember, maybe more like 3D.
Okay.
Yeah, they were more 3D. It's like, I can see this guy who's, all muscled, like see all his abs and strength. And it's like, no, that's
Right,
not what I
right.
want. The other was very stylized and like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that would looks great on a book cover.
Right.
But I think that's probably be another thing too. Yeah, I still think, yeah, they're all like you said, I think there'll always be a need for artists. But I think, but man, for space scenes and things like that,
And
there's probably
again,
something.
I mean, I am in a studio. I'm in an art studio in a warehouse that was converted into a bunch of art studios. Like I'm in here that like I have my place where like I do my work and stuff. And then next door there's like a girl who does pottery and another person who does pottery, and then like several painters. I mean, like I'm in the thick of it. Every second Saturday we open up for art walks and we have people come through and stuff. And so like I'm like art all the time. And this is so different, or it's not. I don't know that it's not so different, but it's like I can totally see it being like a phenomenal tool if you're just 16, 25, you're just messing around making an RPG and you want some art for your RPG. You can just get it, you can just do it. And if you throw it out, you're doing an experimental little project, probably nobody's going to know, and not not going to stop, like it's not going to undermine the results of the work necessarily. And again, that's why I think it's so potentially dangerous and scary for a lot of people. So the people like that who would not have been able to get the money to hire an artist or know the artist that they could work with, to do something like that, I feel like we're just going to have more creations. Now, of course, some of them are going to be total garbage. Many of them are going to be total garbage. But at the same point, like it's a lot more people are going to have access to just make things that look pretty good, especially if they have good taste. than we had 20 years ago, right? Like,
Right. Well, I think the other thing too, it's like it's taken me, and so I did 4 Kickstarters,
mhm,
and now I finally got enough money that not that I was poor before, but my main thing was I was not going to basically I was going to use Kickstarter. I mean, uh, I was not going to be funding my work, so I was going to use Kickstarter money for that.
mhm,
And so, but now I've got to the point where now I can pay ahead of. Well,
yeah,
I would never buy stuff, but now I can actually pay artists or pay writers instead of me writing it, and I can pay them ahead.
right,
But it's taken me a while to get there.
to build that up. Yep.
But I had to use cheap stock art. I had to use a lot of things to get to this point.
Mhm. No,
And so
exactly.
right, I think the AI, it's like it's definitely, but like I just put out on Twitter, I put out a cover I did using Mid Journey, and
Mhm.
people were kind of like, "Oh, this is cool." Just use, and I made a remark, I'll hire a real artist, but you're like, "Well, use that." But it's like it's a very cool picture it did of this planet,
Mhm.
but I don't want it to be of an empty planet. I want some action going on,
Well,
and
yeah,
that's where
yeah.
you need an artist to say, "No, this is what I want this vibe to be," but you
Mhm.
need to add and maybe what the thing will be is in the end, it's maybe they'll do overpainting on some of the stuff.
Absolutely. I've seen a number of people who've been doing overpainting on the stuff, and it seems like not just like it's working, but the artists that are good, and that are like, I would say, more professional, right? It's like I've seen a number of them that they're just using it, and they're doing the overpainting themselves, and they're like, this is speeding me up. This is speeding me up so much. I'm able to do so much more now because I can do this. Um, Very interesting. And like, I know that there's a lot of artists that are feeling threatened by like the book cover thing, right? But during that period of time where you were trying to raise the money so that you could hire an artist, like, you weren't even one of their potential customers anyway.
Right.
So like, is it really threatening them, or is it just giving new people access to pretty decent stuff at an earlier stage and when they're making stuff? And uh, you know, it's a
Right.
good
How's it
question.
different than going to drive through RPG and picking up stock art for, a buck 25 or $3 or $5?
Right.
Because
Well,
that's really underpricing art,
mhm.
but they're just selling through volume. So in that whole stock versus, I mean, it's a long debate, but
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
around we're not going to solve that here. But anyway,
No.
well, I think
Y
we're hitting the time space continuum.
Sure. Well, it's been really fun. Thank you for having me, like, for sure. It's been nice chatting.
No, it's been a while. It's like, I need to have you back on. And we got a good topic. And we did a little bit of rambling, which is good. So I
There you
think we've
go.
checked all the boxes.
Awesome.
Well, thanks again, Jacob.
See you around.
Yeah, no, that was great. I'll probably be dropping this on Saturday.
Okay, cool.
And anyway, yeah, it's just it's a strange amount of emotions people have,
Mhm.
but it all settled out. And I've told people I'm old enough to remember when drum machines came on the market, and there's still drummers today.
Yep,
'Cause that was the big
absolutely.
thing. We don't need a drummer now. We got a drum machine. Well, there's still drummers today,
Mhm.
and there's still drum machines.
Yep. Yeah. No, I do feel like it could potentially clear out a lot of the guys that are just making money off of stock art. Like, I feel like that's who I feel like is gonna get hurt. But if you're a person who's making stuff on your own, like, especially if you're like a person who is a writer and an artist and you already have an audience, like, you're going to be doing great, and you could even use it as a tool to help yourself move faster. um and I still think that if you're a new voice and you're trying to enter the market, like, I feel like it's just going to be a tool to help you do that quicker. I don't I don't know. I still haven't been able to get a good grasp of, like, who are the people that this is really truly threatening. And I know that, like, a lot of it, of course, is like, oh, well, this was trained on copywritten material and it shouldn't have been trained on copywritten material. And it's like, kind of, I mean, my stance is that, well, like at this point, the genie is out of the bottle. We're not going to put it back in, and if people are having lawsuits over the copyright, like yes or no or whatever, the artists who actually had their artwork stolen for this training, they're not going to get any money. It's
Well,
not
but
going to do
here's the
anything
deal:
for
is
them, you know?
here's the deal: the case for the whole human race has been nothing but utilizing other people's work to copy from. I mean, who has it, like artists, taken Mobius or whoever,
Yes.
and it's like everybody, that is how humans learn themselves.
Hmm.
Like nobody asks somebody's permission to, to study a particular artist before they go out and do it. They just get their works and they get their notebooks out and they copy.
I feel like some of the people who have been the most viscerally upset about the copyright issue, they themselves, their portfolio is full of drawings of other people's IPs. Like,
Yeah.
like that's one of the things. Like, I knew an artist who was making a lot of like video game artwork and stuff, and they were drawing all these Nintendo things, and they were going to like conventions and they were selling like prints of their drawing of Mario and Link and Kirby and Samus and whatever.
Yeah.
But then when they would post pictures of their stuff online, they're covering it with like copyright me, copyright me, copyright me, so that people couldn't steal it. And I'm like, you're literally doing artwork. Like, I don't, my brain is broken. I don't know. I can't, what?
Yeah, and I think it's yeah, it'll be interesting to see what this is going to do, because it what it does is it's like everything else, it's lowering barriers of entry.
Yeah.
The technology's been doing that. You and I are laying out books,
Hmm.
that would have not been so easy, 30, 40 years ago.
Yep. Absolutely. So, all right. Well, cool. Well, thank you again for having me. It was
All right,
a blast.
take
So
care, Jacob.
awesome. See you around, man. Bye.